Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel for Catch. My name is Sam and I am the founder and lead coach here at Catch. Unshakable confidence is the key to getting everything that you want in life and dating. So on this channel we talk about everything to do with confidence, mindset and how to implement that in your dating and relationship life. If you want to work with us in any way, you're interested in our coaching or any of our workbooks, that's all in the description box below. So in this video, we're going to be deep diving into why we tend to attract the same types of people or create similar dynamics with people across different dating situations and relationships. And this follows on from our last video, which talked about how the patterns in our life show us how confident we are in different areas of life and where we might need to build more confidence and self-belief. But those patterns were more about outcomes. This is more about, why do I seem to keep on attracting the same kinds of people and create certain dynamics or play particular roles in a relationship? So for example, some people we speak to always seem to be emotionally supporting people that they're dating. They seem to attract people going through a rough time, or they tend to always be the one that organises and plans dates in the relationship or looks after the house, or perhaps you're always the financial breadwinner in a relationship, or you always attract much older or much younger people, which might not be a problem, but this video is just why that tends to happen, and if you want to change it, what you can do about it. If we want to change this pattern, the first thing that we want to do is understand where it's coming from, so that we can then tackle and change the root cause of what's creating this dynamic in terms of who we're attracting and the types of dynamics that are forming. So for example, say you always end up in long distance relationships. It's worth really asking yourself, why do I think I am attracting long distance relationships? And if it's just one long distance relationship, or it started off close and it became long distance due to a job opportunity, we're not talking about that. It's where every single dating dynamic seems to have some sort of physical or emotional distance within it. Firstly, ask yourself why that might be and reflect on it. And we mentioned this in our last video. Usually your inner wisdom will give you an answer to this, and you might know deep down what it is that's driving it, if you can come back to a calm, centered, relaxed place and access that wisdom. So reflecting on it rather than just overthinking about it is important. If an answer doesn't come up straight away, which resonates, it's worth thinking about what reward you might get out of fulfilling that pattern. And it may not be a reward that you're necessarily consciously aware of in the first instance, but when you start to reflect on it, that reward starts to make itself clear. And usually it's to do with perceived safety and security for your brain and your body. So our brain and our bodies love predictability. I've talked about this in a few videos, because ultimately our brain, our body, our nervous system wants to keep us safe and away from danger. And something that's unpredictable or unknown is related to danger in our minds, based on when we were cavemen and each day we didn't necessarily know what we were getting ourselves into. But because of that very useful survival mechanism, what our brain and body tend to do is expect, because we've experienced something or observed something in the past, that the same thing will happen again. And even if it's something that we don't want, it will predict it and almost subconsciously draw us to it, because then at least we have some perceived control and we know the outcome, even if it's not what we want. So going back to the long distance relationship example, if you were to ask yourself and reflect on what might be driving that or what reward you might get, it's worth thinking about is there something within this, and it might not just be long distance relationships, it could be any example. What within this feels familiar to me and therefore could be creating safety and security and stability internally within me at a subconscious deep inner level that I might not even be aware of. So for example, perhaps when you were growing up, you observed your parents or other romantic relationships around you having some element of physical or emotional distance, and therefore that's what you tend to expect and therefore are drawn to in your own adult relationship life. Or similarly, perhaps you have a fear deep down that you might lose a sense of autonomy or a sense of self or some freedoms by being in a committed long-term relationship, and therefore you're automatically, without even knowing it, drawn to long-distance relationships because that gives you that element of autonomy of self and freedom while still being in a relationship. Even though perhaps in the long term you would like to have a closer relationship where you live together because that's what you're used to, or you have a fear or a belief that will keep drawing you to relationships with the element of distance. Or perhaps in the past you've been hurt by people close to you, and the thought of being close and truly vulnerable is scary. So again, having a long distance relationship feels safer, feels like you don't need to be as vulnerable or as open, they don't see as much of you, and you're keeping them quote unquote at a safe distance, whether that's physically or emotionally. And particularly if in that instance, say it was long distance and then you had an opportunity to become closer physically, what happened? Because people that have that fear of being really intimate, the relationship might end or be self-sabotaged around the time there's an opportunity to get closer, and then you find another long distance partner. So that's just one example, but what we'll do is we'll apply that process of self-inquiry and reflection on a couple of other examples just to bring this to life, and hopefully then that will give you enough to start applying it to your own situation. So another common one we see is people attracting those who are perhaps going through a rough time and they end up supporting them emotionally. And that could be quite early on in dating, or that could be in a relationship setting as well. Again, think about what could feel safe and familiar and secure about this dynamic. Where perhaps have you seen it before, and what could the reward be? So did your parents have that sort of dynamic growing up where one was more up and down and the other was more the emotional stability or emotionally caretaking the other one? Or did you have relationships that you would observe around you growing up similar to that? Because if so, again, you might grow up and then expect that as the norm in relationships that you're in, and you might identify yourself as one of those roles. So particularly, let's say if you're a woman and you often take that emotional caretaker role, perhaps your mother took that role in her relationships as you were growing up. And it's not about blaming our parents, it's just about recognizing if you keep attracting that and it's not what you want anymore, where is that coming from? Because the common denominator is in a pattern is us. So it must be something about the energy we're putting out, our behaviors, what we're expecting, that's driving who we're attracted to. So again, just think about what was going on when you were growing up. What sort of reward could you be getting For example, does it make you feel safe and secure by being their emotional support? Do you feel like they need you, and do you like that feeling of being needed? And does that make you feel like you're more tied together and there's more stability in the relationship, or you bring more value to that relationship because you're bringing the emotional support? Because as long as you are identifying with playing that role and seeing your value in a relationship as and why someone would want to be with you, being the reason being that emotional support, you will keep recreating it because that's how you see your value. So you might not feel good enough or worthy in situations where you're not playing that role. So again, this is all just stimulus to reflect on and see what you identify with. Another common scenario that we see or complaint that we get is that one person in a relationship feels like they are the lead when it comes to making plans and organising and running the household, and therefore they feel like they have more of the burden in terms of that, or they're the one that's almost keeping the romance alive by setting up the dates and creating a nice environment, one or the other or both. But they feel like they're taking more of the lead overall in an aspect of the relationship or the relationship as a whole. And again, what reward does that give? For a lot of people who tend to take the lead in relationships, they might take the lead in other areas of life. Perhaps when, again, you were younger, you were taking some sort of lead role in your household. Perhaps you were the oldest child. Perhaps there was some sort of chaos or lots of change in the home. So you found order through planning activities or keeping the home very organised and managing the home. Perhaps that was how you found some sort of routine and safety and security. Or perhaps you've got high standards, or you like to be in control and you like to feel powerful. That makes you feel safe and secure, and therefore when you go into a relationship, which can be unsettling for some people because you're being vulnerable, you're opening yourself up, you're trusting someone else. Perhaps you feel more confident and in control by making the plans and taking control of some of the organizational elements of the relationship. Or again, it might just be the type of relationship that you observed growing up, or you saw others in, or your early relationships, and therefore you just keep on playing that role. So again, same questions. Ask yourself and reflect on, why do you think this dynamic is playing out? What's the reward, quote unquote, or benefit that you're getting out of it? What could feel familiar and safe and secure about this dynamic that keeps drawing you to it? Because if you can answer that question, it's easier to change it. So for example, if it's something that you've observed growing up, you can start consciously observing and looking for around you other relationship dynamics and start to tell your brain, look, there's another way that a relationship can play out. Or if it's because of how you see your worth and your value in a relationship, you can start to change how you see your worth and your value. And we'll go into more of those techniques now. But overall, understanding where those automatic patterns come from mean that you can identify what's creating the pattern, i.e. the thoughts, the behaviours, or energetically what is drawing that to you, or you to that experience that's recreating it. And the great news is, once we've identified that, by changing the underlying reason and you changing, that pattern or outcome will change. So now that we've identified what's going on beneath the surface that's attracting that type of person to us or creating that sort of dynamic, what we now want to do is get clear on, what do we want instead? What's the new type of person or type of dynamic that you want to attract and you want to create in your life going forward? And what we want to get clear on is, what that looks like, but also the version of you that would be in that new dynamic. And what we're going to then do is focus on building your belief and your confidence and changing your perceptions and changing what you expect to align with that new dynamic, that new type of relationship, that new partner, and that new version of you. And we can do that through a few different ways. The first is, and we went through these steps in our last video about patterns as well, starting to affirm for those new beliefs. So if you are always drawn to long distance relationships because of that fear of loss of autonomy or sense of self or independence, you might start to tell yourself, okay, it is safe for me to be vulnerable. I deserve a close, fulfilling, loving relationship with someone who I can spend a lot of time with, and reassure yourself that you can still maintain a sense of independence and your hobbies and design how often you see each other and the nature of that relationship so that you can keep your independence. So you might start to reassure yourself of those things and change your beliefs through affirmations and telling yourself the statement which you need to hear to feel confident and like a new version of you that could sustain a long-term, physically close relationship. You might also start to visualize and then embody what the new version of you will look like. So taking one of the other examples of somebody who tends to be emotionally supportive or take the lead in terms of organization in a relationship, what does the new version of you look like that has the dynamic you want? So if you want to have more of a mutual exchange of emotional support, or both partners take equal role in doing the organization, you would start to visualize what that dynamic would be like. What would that sort of partner, whether your current partner or a new one, say to you if that was the case? What would it be like when you message each other, when you greet each other when you get home, when you spend time together? What sort of activities would you do? Get very clear how that sort of relationship would look and the version of you, and what you would need to, and ask yourself, what would I need to start doing and stop doing to move from where I am now and the behaviour showing up now to that future version of me? So for example, say you're always the one that organises dates and things around the home. Maybe you notice on early dates at the moment, you offer to organise the first 3 or 4, and it sort of sets that dynamic. Or maybe you notice actually at the start, it's more equal, but it's only over time that you tend to take more and more control and take on more of that organisational role. If you start to do it early on, what you might need to do when embodying the new version where it's more equal is give the other person the space to show up and organise some of those early dates and let them do that, or even ask them to do that and see how they respond and see if you can create that new sort of dynamic with someone where it's more equal. Or if it tends to happen over time, which being candid was something that I previously struggled with, it would be checking my own behaviours over time and going, okay, at the start it's more equal, but over time I tend to lean in and do more. So for me to break that pattern and create a new dynamic, I have to trust that the other person will also want to make plans for us and do things around the home. And I have to step back and give them the opportunity to do it, or ask them to do it, and then be appreciative when they do. And also think about what other value you can add in the relationship outside of the organisation. So perhaps you bring enough value just being you, just being funny, just being entertaining, just being kind. And therefore you don't always have to contribute to the relationship by organising things or tidying around the home. There could be other things that you bring. Or similarly with emotional support, perhaps that's the role you've always ended up playing, and so say early on, if someone's having a rough time, you'll carry on seeing them, but perhaps in the future you'll set a new boundary and say, look, I can see that you're going through a rough time. I really like you and I want to date you, but I can't be your emotional support right now. So, please lean on your friends and family, but I would love to reconnect when you're in a better place. So think about, where is it that the dynamic starts to form, and what would the new version of you, who's in the sort of dynamic you want, how would they approach it? And you can look at friends and family to get inspiration for that, or you can use your affirmations and your visualization to daydream and imagine what the future would look like and start to embody those new behaviors. The other thing that we would recommend is, we've talked about journaling in previous videos, but as well as journaling, actually just write down a list of what you are looking for in a partner and what sort of relationship that you want, and go down to as much detail as you want. How often you see each other, what sort of things you do together, how you communicate, who does what in their relationship, and what do you bring, and what's that version of you in that relationship. So yes, visualizing it, imagining it, affirming the new beliefs is helpful, but sometimes, and what we recommend all of our clients to do, is just to write a very clear list of exactly what you want, what it looks like, and start to believe that you can have that, because it also gives you a goal and an aim to work towards that you can refer to. So as you're dating people and dynamics are forming, is it moving towards what you want or not? Do you need to course correct? Is this the right kind of partner that you're looking for? It gives you a bit more objectivity to change patterns and be conscious about, and conscious being the key word, who you're choosing and what you're choosing for your life. And dynamics can change between people if you're already in a relationship and you want to shift that, but it depends on you changing first. So embodying that new version of you, being clear on what you want, articulating what it is that you want, and discussing that with your partner over time and working on it, and believing that you deserve that new dynamic. So it all starts with being clear on what you want, clear on what's getting in the way, and then doing something to change that, whether that's affirmations, imagining or visualization, writing more things down, journaling, and embodying that new version of you. And again, along the way, we talked about this in the last video, there will be moments of challenge, or you might slip back into the old way of being, or you might feel unsafe on this journey because it's something new which feels unpredictable and unsafe for your body, which we talked about. And that's where emotional regulation and nervous system regulation come in. Do your breath work, do your meditation, have some time just to reflect on your own, or do your journaling, envelop yourself in your work or hobby, anything that can distract your mind, interrupt automatic patterns of thinking, so that you can then start to make more conscious choices, and doing that in a moment-to-moment basis in the present moment. So really practicing that mindfulness as well. And over time, keep persisting, keep learning, keep reflecting on what's going well and what you need to refine further, until you move towards that new type of dynamic that you want, and you see it reflected in who you're attracting in and the type of dynamic. Because yes, there will be internal and external challenges along the way, but that's part of the growth process. That's part of what's so rewarding about change. And just because it doesn't happen straight away doesn't mean that it won't happen. It's up to you to decide and be clear and determined that you're going to create something different, because that's what you want. And if you want it, then you deserve it and you can have it. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was clear. If you have any questions, anything that is unclear, just comment that down below. If you have any experience of this, where you've been able to change a dynamic with someone, or perhaps you were always attracting a certain kind of person and you were able to change that, or you were able to change how you were showing up in your dating and relationship life, or even in your friendships, right? This can all apply in friendships. Would love to hear your experiences and any advice that you have for others down below. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting and subscribing, and see you in the next one. Thanks, bye.